Welcome to science class. Today we are going to learn about rocks. Now when people hear that, they tend to think, I might as well watch paint dry. But I promise it won't be like that as long as you keep an open mind and an active imagination. The main reason people think rocks are boring is because most people don't know anything about rocks. But they can tell you a huge amount of information. Here, I'll show you. I'm lucky enough to have enough time off in the summer to travel, and so I do. These photos are of places I have personally visited, and I took all these photos. Now, these landscapes are breathtaking, and they get most of their beauty from their geology. Understanding the forces at work here and being able not just to look at a landscape, but also interpret it, makes it even more beautiful. I can tell you that the cliffs in Zion Canyon, pictured here, were formed during the Jurassic period, when all of Earth's land masses were joined together as Pangea. This dried out the interior of what is now North America into vast deserts, and formed these gigantic half-mile tall cliffs of sandstone. It's essentially a petrified desert. Sure, it's naturally beautiful, but it has value beyond just what you can see by glancing at it. Maybe you don't see it the way I do just yet, and that's okay. What we're specifically doing today is learning about igneous rocks. In the last few videos, we discussed what minerals are, how they form, and their properties. Rocks are aggregates of different minerals, and igneous rocks are born out of magma or lava, so they're made from minerals that crystallize under those conditions. Igneous rocks come in all variety of colors, shapes, compositions, and they too can tell us a great deal about Earth's history. Let's get started. As I stated before, igneous rocks are produced from the molten portions of Earth's geosphere. Most igneous rocks form several kilometers below our feet. Others form on Earth's surface. Magma is molten material below the surface, while lava is molten material on Earth's surface. And this includes the bottom of the oceans, because the surface means the surface of the geosphere. Igneous rocks that form from magma are classified as intrusive or plutonic igneous rocks. Plutonic igneous rocks tend to have higher concentrations of slightly heavier elements like aluminum, iron, calcium, sodium, potassium, magnesium, because heavier elements become more common the deeper into Earth you go. Examples of plutonic igneous rocks include granite, diorite, gabbro, and peridotite. It's actually easy to tell if a rock formed several kilometers below ground just by looking at it, because there is a distinct mineral pattern that plutonic igneous rocks have. But more on that later. Igneous rocks that form from lava, remember that's molten material on the surface, are classified as extrusive igneous rocks. Extrusive igneous rocks are also distinct because of the mineral pattern that they possess, and you can clearly see this with the naked eye, although it might help to have a magnifying glass. Common extrusive igneous rocks include basalt, which makes up virtually the entire ocean floor. Pumice, scoria, obsidian, and rhyolite are other examples. Apart from where the igneous rocks formed, geologists further classify igneous rocks by their texture and composition. We'll look at texture first. Texture refers to the average grain size of the minerals within a rock. Some igneous rocks are smooth, even to the point where we consider them to be glass. Others have a very rough texture with large crystals. Minerals like halite, which form due to precipitations, can grow large crystals overnight. But minerals that crystallize from magma can take a few thousand years just to grow 1 centimeter wide. So the general rule here is the more coarse the texture of an igneous rock, the more time it's spent crystallizing, which generally means the deeper within the earth it formed, whereas the finer its texture, the closer to the surface it formed. Coarse-grained igneous rocks include all of the plutonic igneous rocks. Granite crystals may only be a few millimeters wide, or they may be a centimeter or more wide, but even millimeter-sized minerals feel very coarse. Fine-grained igneous rocks form either on the surface or very near the surface. Because these rocks harden in minutes, days, weeks, or months, the mineral crystals are much smaller, and so these rocks are smoother in texture. Basalt is not smooth like a countertop, but if you compare it to raw granite, there's a huge difference in texture. basalt is actually chemically identical to gabbro, a coarse-grained plutonic igneous rock. The only difference is the size of the mineral crystals in gabbro compared to basalt. In gabbro, they're much larger. Glassy textured igneous rocks also are extrusive, but they form much more rapidly. They feel like glass because, well, they actually are glass. Obsidian is the best known example of a glassy textured igneous rock. But not just any kind of lava that forms on the surface can have a glassy texture. That would be a mistake to think so. You also have to have the right ingredients to form a glassy texture. It's all down to which elements and minerals are present at the time of formation. If a certain group of minerals and elements are present, one rock type will form. Whereas if a completely different groups of minerals are present, even if the conditions are the same, a different rock type will form. There is another kind of glassy texture called vesicular. Pumice is a vesicular, glassy, extrusive igneous rock. It's completely full of holes and air pockets and is basically the only rock that will float. Think of it as like a glass sponge. And pumice forms very rapidly from lava ejected from volcanoes, and then trapped air within the erupting lava rapidly expands and escapes, leaving the air pockets behind. The spongy texture of bread is sort of analogous to what happens with pumice. The final texture is porphyritic. What sets porphyritic apart is that these rocks contain different minerals, as all rocks do, but of very different sizes. So if you look again at granite, you'll notice that all of the mineral grains are pretty uniform in size. Same with basalt pictured here. But not so with porphyritic rocks, which you can see in these pictures. How does it get that way? Well, what happens is certain minerals start crystallizing at some temperature, let's just say 700 degrees Celsius. But other minerals can't start forming until the temperature drops below, say, 400 degrees. It can take centuries for a rock to cool from 700 to 400, so those minerals that crystallize at the higher temperature have a gigantic head start in their growth, and so they are much larger in the end. The other major classification method used with igneous rocks is their composition. Composition is an analysis of the mineral content. Because silica is the most common mineral, these categories are pretty much just a measure of how much silica is present. Primarily feldspar and quartz minerals. Felsic igneous rocks generally have the lightest composition, but this isn't always true. Obsidian, for example, is one of the most felsic igneous rocks, but it's also one of the darkest. Felsic rocks are the ones that are more than 63% silica and are rich in feldspar. Granite is a common felsic igneous rock. In fact, granite is the most common rock on our planet. Intermediate igneous rocks contain between 52 and 63% silica. Andesite is a common intermediate igneous rock, which forms from volcanic activity. Mafic igneous rocks have between 45 and 52% silica content. These rocks tend to be high in iron and magnesium. Gabbro is a common Plutonic mafic rock, and basalt is a common extrusive mafic rock. Ultramafic rocks are called that way because they contain a lot of mafic minerals, which are minerals like silicates but have a lot of heavy metals like aluminum and magnesium. Olivine and pyroxene are examples of those types of minerals. It's only Plutonic igneous rocks that can be ultramafic. Peridotite is an example of an ultramafic igneous rock. As I stated at the beginning of the video, igneous rocks can help us interpret Earth's history. Let's look at one of the most scenic places in North America, Yosemite National Park. These enormous cliffs are very different than the cliffs in other places like Zion Canyon. Notice how in Yosemite the entire rock formation is uniform. There are no bands or layers. This is a clue that it is an igneous rock formation that formed more or less as one unit. But where did it form? Well, if we look at the rocks, we can see that they are granite, with coarse, visible minerals. This had to have formed deep in the ground. So what's it doing on the surface? Well, if we travel east, all we run into are mountain ranges. Those mountain ranges and Yosemite were uplifted by plate tectonics. Erosion later stripped away the layers above, and indeed it continues to sculpt this entire area today. Lava can't produce granite. It's not possible. Only magma can produce granite. So Yosemite was not created or formed on Earth's surface originally. Throughout the long, very long history of Earth, this landscape has been formed and then revealed to us. Let's look at Yellowstone National Park next. You've probably heard before that Yellowstone is actually a supervolcano that will one day surely kill us all. And if you haven't heard that before, then surprise! Okay, you can calm down. If Yellowstone were going to erupt, there would likely be decades, if not centuries, of geologic activity within the park that would be clearly detectable before a mega eruption ever happened. But it does have a history of incredibly violent eruptions, and we can find the evidence of it. Throughout the park, which I've been to, you can find these odd horizontal bands of dark rock sandwiched between layers that don't match at all. These are called sills, and they are crystallized lava beds made of andesite or basalt. Notice the vertical divisions known as joints between them. We're going to come back to those later. Clearly, there was a unique episode that deposited this layer of lava down, and then business as normal resumed, and completely different processes deposited more layers of rock above it. The fact that right here in this small area there is such a lack of uniformity is more proof that our planet is dynamic and has changed a lot over huge spans of time. Finally, let's check out two more locations. The first one is Devil's Tower, the first national monument. Devil's Tower exhibits the same columns that those sills in Yellowstone had, except at Devil's Tower they are huge. Devil's Tower is what we call a laccolith. It formed from a magma body that was injected between pre-existing sedimentary rock layers. Again, uplift and erosion later brought it up to the surface and exposed it. The other formation is the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. The Giant's Causeway formed from basalt on the Earth's surface, unlike Devil's Tower. However, just like Devil's Tower, it exhibits these hexagonal columns. We saw those in Yellowstone as well. The reason these exist is molten rock cools as it solidifies, and it shrinks. Because rocks are not flexible, they tend to break as this shrinking occurs. The gaps, which we call joints, between these columns are the result of uniform cooling and a formation that is uniform in composition, meaning the minerals that make up the entire thing are pretty consistent all throughout. Next time, we're going to discuss how sedimentary rocks are formed and the even richer detail of Earth's history that they preserve. Thanks for watching.